Yes, hello everybody from Schaubühne, Berlin. I'm Thomas Ostermeier and I'm happy to be part of this international festival from the Thalia Theater in Hamburg. Hello all the international theater makers and the international theater community, and especially because it's focused in this very edition of the Lessing Tage, the Eastern European theater makers and the Eastern European theater audience. So I was asked to tell a little bit my view on the situation, and I thought maybe it's helpful to have an analysis which I'm training with my students, looking on theater scenes, where I try to teach them to see the overall situation and then focus more on the dramatic situation. Dramatic situation is a situation which forces the participant to act, the characters to act, to take up action, to raise a voice. So the overall situation, all of you know it. We are living in a pandemic for nearly 1 year now, and there is no end to be seen. Just today, Angela Merkel told us we need this lockdown we are undergoing at the moment in Germany for another 8 to 10 weeks. So probably we will not be back on stage before end of March or beginning of April. Part of the overall situation is that a lot of free artists, a lot of actors, directors, stage designers, video artists, musicians are all undergoing a very hard time. We try to support them from the Schaubühne, those members which are constantly working for the Schaubühne, but also the people we are inviting for our Find Festival. We try to give them at least half of what was thought to be translated to their companies, because as all of you know, we in Germany have a system of permanent companies. So the permanent companies in Germany are a bit better off at the moment. But when it comes to freelance artists, it's very hard. One thing which I'm drawing as a conclusion from this situation is not only to raise our voice for the free artists, but also, or freelance artists, but also to raise our voice for everybody in this society in Europe and maybe even internationally, to raise our voice for everybody who's having a life in precarious situation, may it be somebody working in a restaurant, or may it be in any other situation where they are for the moment not able to work and to earn a living and to feed their family. So what I've been trying to install as a discourse for a few months already now is unconditional basic income, not only for artists, but for everybody living in Germany, or maybe even for everybody living in Europe. This unconditional basic income would mean that all these very hard and difficult procedures you have to undergo, bureaucratic procedures, to make sure that you can feed yourself and your family, that all these procedures would become needless, and we would not only provide everybody with hope and a way to survive in pandemic times, but also we would do something for the future, where, as everybody knows, neoliberal ideas in our societies make it much more difficult for a lot of people to survive, and fear of not being able to survive in this system is the driving force of the neoliberal society we're living in. This is true for artists, but this is also true for a big part of the rest of the society, not only for the underprivileged, but I do believe that this fear is also a force which drives people in the middle class in their daily life, and as a result you have a lot of problems like burnout or other psychological diseases which we are facing more and more, and I think that this is due to this fear which has been installed, I'd say it started beginning of the 80s and which has been installed in all our societies, also in our new partners from Eastern Europe. And it's very important to fight this fear, and one possibility would be unconditional basic income. So the situation at the moment is dramatic. The situation at the moment is dramatic. I already mentioned it for freelance artists and underprivileged members of our society, but the situation is also dramatic for theaters itself. All of us are in the moment under lockdown and are not able to go in front of an audience. We see that it's important to do so. We understand it's important to do so, but at the same time, what we are living from, like the constant contact with audience, and this live event, this live moment of theater is not possible at the moment, and this cuts us from all our energy supplies, because it's not only about that we need the box office or we need the touring, but it's more that an actor on stage needs the energy from the audience, needs the response from the audience. We all need to meet after a performance, to chat what our impression is. We need it as a social exchange, and we need it to survive this lack of sense which we all feel in our daily life and in our realities. I don't see necessarily that digital theater which tries to become digital is a way out of this situation. I do believe when it comes to digitalized theater, we are going towards a medium which is two-dimensional. So you are working, you're editing for a screen, and I don't see a big difference to the movies, to television. So we are competing in this field with very advanced art form, which is film and which is television. And so what is important in order to compete with this, we would need very high professional ways of recording, of editing, of then making an event at the end of the day, which is able to compete with, let's say, a Netflix series. Because if we are not achieving these aesthetic goals, why would any spectator choose for theater when he or she could go online and see a movie on the big streaming platforms? So yes, of course, it's important to do the streaming. We are doing the streaming since the beginning of the first lockdown. What we did is putting online a lot of productions which are from the times before I took over the artistic direction at the Schaubühne, but also from the time since 2000. But what we are trying to do is always streaming performances, or in 90% of the cases we're streaming performances which were done for television, which were recorded for television. So we most of the time these productions were made with 8 to 10 cameras, and you have quite a professional high standard in these performances. And I want to say that this is pretty much important. It's important for this time where there's no theater. You can look back in the archives, you can see what happened. A lot of shows which were important for the history of theater, you can see maybe even for the first time. So this is a possibility, but it's not a way out. I was also asked to talk about what will happen after the pandemic. Well, I cannot tell, but I've been looking a lot into theater history, and there are two examples. One example is the time of Shakespeare during the big plague, which happened to be during the lifetime of Shakespeare, where he was forced to close his theaters for 60 months during his lifetime. Again and again, the theater was closed. At the same time, it was a very creative period of European theater history. So they could deal with it, and I do believe that we also can deal with it. We can deal with these lockdowns. And the other example is the Spanish flu, end of the First World War, happening from 1918 and 1919. But what we saw after the Spanish flu was the roaring 20s or the golden 20s. So a big hunger for culture, for entertainment culture, for theater, and a very creative avant-garde time for all the art forms involved. So I'm pretty confident that let's say autumn of this year, we can go back in front of an audience for sure. We hopefully will be able to have a full seated audience at this moment, and I'm very optimistic that it will be a great time if we really succeeded in overcoming the pandemic. Why am I saying so? Because I have a lot of feedback of our spectators, not only here in Berlin or in Germany, but internationally, how important they consider theater, how important they consider Schaubühne to be in this context, and how passionate and desperate they are waiting to come back to the theater. So I'm not sharing at all this worry that we kind of will be forgotten, or that that culture is under pressure, or culture is put into question. Concerning then that is my last chapter of my little speech, putting culture into question. There's a lot of discourse going on in the newspapers, in the medias, in the social medias, and even kind of a self-fulfilling bad prophecy. Everybody is saying, yes, because we invested so much money during lockdown in order to make survive our societies. We spent so much money, billions of credits on a European level, and that will put the budget for theater and culture into question after the pandemic. I think in this case we need to raise our voices, and we have to be very clear. And I can give you some numbers here in Berlin. In Berlin, the money for theater, text-based theater, is 0.9% of the budget of the city of Berlin. So not even 1%. So it is very important in these contexts always to hint to the fact that our budgets for theater and for cultures are anyway so small. And when we go to Great Britain or other parts of Europe or other parts of the world, this amount spent for culture is even smaller, as you all know. So I would always point out that there is no need to lower this, because the effect of lowering these budgets would be senseless, because there wouldn't be any effect which really helps the budgets of the communities, the public budget, to be better off. This is very important, so please, that would be my advice. Look at the numbers in your in the area you're working in the regions you're working in, and try to defend our view on things that already now and already before the pandemic, not enough money was spent for the arts and culture. So yeah, in my before last chapter of my little speech, I gave you already a very optimistic view on post-pandemic times. This is with this message I would like to end my little speech and say hello again to everybody, and wish everybody a great online festival with a lot of success. And I was not talking about what is obvious, that during these times we don't have any exchange on European or international level. That's why I do believe that events like this are very important, and I hope that in post-pandemic times we can go back to a reality where we have theater festivals, where we have exchange between big and small companies all around the world, that we pick up where we were before the pandemic, because I do believe in these times where the threats, the political threats, are so big and getting bigger and bigger, it's so important to communicate with other nations, with other countries, with other audiences, with different cultures. This is vital for mankind in order maybe to overcome these very dark times. And these very dark times are not only dark times because of the pandemics, but much more because of the rise of populism. And a lot of people living under the threat of populists need international solidarity. The international solidarity I spent, for example, for the Art and Theatre Academy in Budapest, but also I'm thinking of my colleagues in Poland or the colleagues in Russia. It's so important to show from here our solidarity to these colleagues in the Eastern European part of the world, which are under the threat of very strong populist leaders. So I want to say you're not alone. We stand by you. That was my message, and cheers to everybody.